He was born knowing nothing. At 3, he learned to walk. At 6, he went to school. Life kept climbing upward. Until 65, when life began to rewind. Before he died, he whispered, "Life is nothing but a long circle. Now turn down the lights, pull up your blanket, and follow my voice. We are about to begin our story." He was born on a day when the white light in the delivery room shone like a polished moon hanging above his head. Some cried, some laughed, but he only knew how to inhale and exhale, drawing the world into his chest through instinct. The nurse held him up and let his tiny fingers clutch a steadier finger. At that time, he could not walk. Even turning over required a gentle push from the wind slipping through the window cracks. At 3, he learned to walk. From the living room to the doorway, from the doorway to the alley. He pressed the world into a string of small round dots. Water stains on the floor sunspots scattered through the patterned window chalk circles drawn by his sister. When he fell, his grandmother laughed and lifted him, saying, "Every footprint is its own kind of map." He did not yet understand maps, but he understood the direction of the road. Forward meant bigger, backward meant home. At 6, he went to school. The first word the teacher taught him to write was not person, but circle. The chalk spun once on the blackboard, white dust falling, as if the world had been given a boundary. The clock ticked on the wall, and he learned to measure time by circles. On the playground, he jumped rope, the rope's shadow sweeping the ground like months passing. Teeth fell and grew again. Shoes shrank year by year. He began to ask questions. Why is the sun round? Why does the moon sometimes lack a corner? Why do balls roll while most stones stay still? At 18, he saw the world as an uphill road. The wheels of his bicycle were like 2 stubborn sons, carrying him over bridges, beyond the borders of his town. He tried his first journey alone, learning to read maps at unfamiliar bus stops, to recognize stars on strange night roads. Love came like a summer storm, leaving behind damp laughter after it passed. He imagined the future as a mountain. The higher you climb, the clearer the air, the farther you can see. At 30, he had a house, and in the house, a child. When his child was 3, the child learned to walk, and he followed behind, his hands like guardrails to keep a small world from falling. He taught the child to write. The first word was not person, but circle. He said, "From 0, anything can grow." In the office, he drew flowcharts. In meetings, round tables, he learned how to speak on different arcs of conversation. He arranged business cards in neat fans, stacked responsibilities one circle upon another on his shoulders. From 40 to 60, life was like a Ferris wheel at its peak. The view opened wide. The city as lights and the river as curves became lines on an atlas. He grew fluent in speech, precise in silence, knowing exactly when to act to draw the finest arcs. He took his mother to hospital checkups, holding her hand as she once held his. He guided his father across the street, waiting until the green circle of light shone before walking step by step. His child grew tall and spoke with an angle of his own. The home filled with circles, the dining table, mugs, wall decorations. Life had its own inertia, like a ball nudged gently, rolling smoothly along familiar tracks. At 65, the stairs suddenly steepened. Words shrank, medicine labels blurred into fog. Roads grew longer. From the park gate to the bench, he needed pauses to catch his breath. Names slipped away, as if someone was quietly tearing pages from his book. He joked, "Maybe my mind is too full, I need to clear some space." The doctor pressed a circular stethoscope to his chest, hearing an old clock still ticking inside. Back home, he picked up a cane, its tip tapping on the ground, step by step, like a compass measuring the distance between door and home. After 70, life began to rewind. At first, it was subtle. He had taught his child to ride a bike. Now his grown child pushed his wheelchair along the same river path. He had once cut meat at the dinner table. Now food was cut small for him. He had once patted his child's back to sleep. Now someone patted his back at night, fearing he might wake suddenly. Words withdrew one by one, like stars fading in daylight. Newspapers became pictures he could recognize, but not read. His sentences shrank, leaving only the weather, the pain, the fatigue, and the word good. He forgot how to tie shoelaces, so he changed to Velcro. Later, he could no longer walk, leaving his shoes at the door like two empty shells he had once learned to swallow. Now pills had to be crushed. He had once learned to hold bowls. Now soup was spooned to his lips. His world shrank to the window by the bed, the clock on the wall, and the photo album with its worn pages. Sometimes sunlight slipped through the window, resting on his hand, the skin like dry soil, but still able to hold warmth. His family learned new ways to accompany him. His granddaughter traced circles on his palm, as if drawing C's on sand. His daughter turned the photo album, reading names aloud like lighting lamps one by one in the night. He saw circles everywhere: wedding rings, bowls, cups, the moon, wheels, teardrops spreading on the table. Each could lead him back to a different moment. One late evening, rain stopped only after midnight, and the clock in the room grew dull from damp air. He suddenly remembered a song, but not the lyrics, only the rhythm. He drew circles in the air with his finger, the same paths he once trod learning to walk, the same paths traced by his wheelchair along the river, the same paths he had been following all his life. Those paths layered into a larger circle above him, and he felt himself standing at its center, surrounded on all sides by what had been. On his final clear day, children outside played hopscotch, chalk dust falling white onto the street. He heard the scrape of shoes on the ground like waves. His wife held his hand, her palm still warm. His breath rose and fell like tides. He opened his mouth and, with effort, let out the words like a seed returned to the earth. He said, "Life is nothing but a long circle." When he closed his eyes, a child outside tossed a pebble into a chalk-drawn ring. The sound of the stone landing was faint, so faint it seemed silent. Night slipped from the roof, down the sheets, onto his hair, onto every clock that had once ticked in his life. The clocks still moved, but their sound drifted farther, until only an unseen arc remained, stretching quietly, endlessly, down the slope of time. Years later, his granddaughter had grown. One afternoon, she wrote in her exercise book. On the top left corner of the first page, she drew a small circle. Afterward, she lifted her head and looked out the window. The sky was bright blue, the clouds like soft chalk tracing an incomplete circle above. She smiled and, without knowing why, closed the circle. She only felt a voice inside whisper, "From zero, anything can grow." And so the circle began again.